A young woman's lifeless body was found on the side of an abandoned road in the state of Morelos. The person who found her called emergency services right away. The body was still, her clothes were rumpled and discolored, and there were obvious bruising and abrasions on her flesh. Authorities did not find any documents or personal things in the area that may be used to identify her. This signaled the start of an inquiry to clarify the events and determine the causes of this tragedy. Ariadna Fernanda López Díaz was born on July 5, 1995, in a poor area of Mexico City. Although her early years were characterized by a lack of resources, they were also filled with love and care. Her mother and her older brother Omar made up her family, and even though there was no father figure who took much interest in his kids, they managed to stay together through support from one another. Ariadna was known for her warm and approachable personality, which made her popular among her peers. She stood out for her sincerity and willingness to help others. Omar became a role model and protector for Ariadna, offering her unwavering encouragement. Their close bond gave Ariadna a sense of security, knowing that there would always be someone she could rely on. She spent her school years with close pals, with whom she frequently discussed her future aspirations. But in 2018, when Ariadna was only 23, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. The illness progressed quickly, and soon after, the family had to face the inevitable. Her mother's death was a devastating blow to both Ariadna and Omar. In addition to strengthening their bond, this tragedy forced Ariadna to mature quickly and take responsibility for her own life. She had her name tattooed as a permanent tribute to her mother, ensuring that her mother's presence would always be with her. Prior to the loss of her mother, Ariadna had met a young man and quickly fell in love. Their romance progressed quickly, and before long, Ariadna learned that she was expecting a son, but the arrival of her son did not bring the stability she had hoped for. The young couple soon realized their paths were diverging after parting ways, maintaining a neutral relationship while caring for their son. Ariadna had to strike a balance between the demands of parenthood and finding employment to support herself and her son. Her first job was at a well-known bar in Mexico City, which was frequented by wealthy customers and had high standards for its employees. Despite the challenges, Ariadna thrived in her role, using her charisma and strong work ethic to get through the obstacles. The pandemic caused major changes in her life, including the loss of her job due to the closure of the place where she worked. Instead of giving up, Ariadna used this time to pursue a long-held dream, opening her own beauty salon. This project became a symbol of her determination and desire to build a life independent of external circumstances, drawing on her extensive network and experience. During this time, she met a man with whom she quickly connected, which became a source of stability and joy for her. By the age of 27, she juggled her time between her partner, her job, and her son. Her days were busy, but she managed to find happiness in every new opportunity. Ariadna's life was like a puzzle that had been put together, with each challenge and accomplishment adding to a picture of resiliency and success. She had lost everything, started over, taken care of her son's future, and gained independence. But what appeared to be the beginning of a happy chapter turned out to be the prelude to a tragedy. Through mutual contacts, Ariadna and Vanessa first interacted at an event that Ariadna had attended with her friends. Vanessa quickly drew Ariadna's attention since she was youthful, lively, and captivating. Vanessa had a talent for making connections with people fast, but those who knew her well had conflicting opinions about her. Beneath her seeming candor, she had sharp edges, and her unpredictable behavior frequently caught people off guard. A middle-aged businessman named Rautel was often seen in Vanessa's social circle. His reputation was tainted by rumors about his wealth, influence, and extravagant lifestyle. He was frequently spotted with young women who wanted to be a part of his world, and rumors of his connections to influential people and even criminal networks helped to support his status, but no one in his circle was able to verify these rumors. Even though Ariadna was smart and self-sufficient, she didn't immediately realize how different her new companions were from her typical circle, since Rautel avoided having open conversations about his background and business affairs. However, his manner generated both respect and anxiety. In an attempt to impress, Vanessa frequently spoke about her relationships with powerful individuals such as Rautel, portraying him as someone who could eventually solve any issue. Ariadna started hanging out with them more. Vanessa made an effort to earn Ariadna's trust and appeared to be truly enthralled with her. After hearing about Ariadna from Vanessa, Rautel immediately showed interest in her and won her over with his conversational abilities and attentiveness. There was no denying his charisma and self-assurance, and Ariadna was no exception. But beneath this appeal lay a more nuanced personality, as those who interacted with Rautel observed his propensity for manipulation. However, Ariadna thought he was a polite and compassionate man. As time went on, strange details started to come to light. For example, some of Ariadna's friends cautioned her to be cautious around Rautel because of his dubious reputation and Vanessa's unpredictable nature, suggesting that these relationships could pose hidden risks. Vanessa continued to play a significant role in strengthening the bond between Ariadna and Rautel by regularly inviting Ariadna to gatherings where Rautel was present, creating an atmosphere of trust and openness. In spite of the cautions, Ariadna saw her association with Vanessa as a chance to escape from her everyday obligations and discover a world that had previously been out of her grasp, and she saw no threat in her new social circle. Rautel, on the other hand, tried to win her over by being kind and generous. He invited her to dinners and parties, which she found intriguing and innocuous. As we know, Ariadna was seeing a young man, but that didn't stop her from keeping up friendships and occasionally accepting invitations to social gatherings because, according to the information that was available, her partner was trustworthy and didn't show displeasure with her social interactions. Over time, Ariadna noticed that her new relationships were beginning to impact her life. Vanessa phoned her often, offering get-togethers and organizing leisure activities. In the meantime, Rautel made a greater effort to establish himself in Ariadna's life by frequently providing assistance and support in a variety of circumstances. Little did he know that Ariadna was slowly assimilating into their society and was not aware of the possible repercussions. October 30th, 2022, Vanessa invited Ariadna to join her friends for the evening, and the gathering was scheduled to start at Fisher's, a well-known eatery in downtown Mexico City. Vanessa reassured her that it would be a pleasant evening filled with wonderful company and a leisurely meal. The group got together later that evening, and the restaurant, which is known for its trendy clientele and upscale interiors, provided a lively backdrop for the gathering. The atmosphere at the table was light-hearted and festive, with wine cocktails and a variety of appetizers adding to the celebratory atmosphere. Rautel was also expected to join, which gave Ariadna a slight sense of unease, despite her growing reservations about him. However, she didn't want to strain her friendship with Vanessa, so she decided not to decline. Rautel made himself the center of attention by telling anecdotes and making toasts, as was his custom. He went out of his way to demonstrate his influence and engaged with the waitstaff with assurance. Vanessa helped him by making jokes and offering commentary to keep the conversation going. The other guests tried to match the host's enthusiasm by following their example. Within the lively atmosphere, Ariadna's behavior stood out because she didn't seem entirely at ease. She kept checking her phone, reading messages, and typing out responses, and her eyes were constantly on Rautel, as though she was looking for some hidden meaning in his words or actions. Vanessa tried to divert her attention by bringing her into conversations and encouraging her to try another cocktail. But Ariadna remained reserved, and her expression made it clear that something was bothering her more than the surroundings. The group decided to move to Rautel's house as the evening went on. Rautel himself suggested it, and Vanessa enthusiastically supported the idea, saying it would allow them to continue the evening in a more private setting. Ariadna posted a mysterious message on her social media midway through the evening, asking her close friends and family if they would miss her if I disappeared. Many in her wider circle dismissed it as a joke, but those who knew her well noted that she had never written anything like this before. The post left an uneasy impression, even though no one could have predicted it would be her last. The rest of the group followed suit, crammed into Rautel's car for the short drive to his home after Ariadna hesitated, but finally agreed after Vanessa urged her to do so. Rautel's home, which was in an upscale neighborhood, highlighted his status and had a modern interior with opulent touches. The group arrived and went into a large living room. The evening proceeded with music and drinks, but Ariadna became more uneasy as she often moved away to check her phone and pretended to make calls. Ariadna said she wanted to go home, citing exhaustion, but Vanessa persuaded her to stay a little while longer, suggesting they could leave in about 30 minutes. Rautel was unusually quiet at that point, and he occasionally glanced at Ariadna in a way that made her feel even more uneasy as the evening wore on and the other guests began to depart. Vanessa noticed this and started whispering with Rautel, which only made the tension worse. Unfortunately, Ariadna was among the last to go. No one in the group would ever see her alive again. An incident rocked Morelos the next morning, October 31st, 2020, when two bikers on an early morning ride discovered a woman's death on the side of a rural road. The spot was far from any major highways and in a place that people hardly ever visited. The tragedy was highlighted by the surroundings. Bleak landscape. There were few shrubs and a spooky silence. The woman was dressed, but her clothes were filthy and looked worn out. She had several bruises and what appeared to be contusions on her body. Several hours after witnesses reported the event to law enforcement, the riders snapped pictures of the location to record the surroundings, and maybe in order to assist in identifying the victim, the police promptly roped off the area and started gathering evidence. Tire traces and signs indicating the body had been moved were discovered in the ground. Forensic experts observed obvious evidence of a struggle, but it was impossible to pinpoint the precise circumstances of the tragedy because the cause of death was not immediately apparent, and no visible injuries connected to a weapon were discovered. The identity of the woman was unknown at the time because no documents or personal belongings were discovered with her. A few hours later, pictures of the body started making the rounds on social media, raising a lot of discussion among friends and family of Ariadna, who had gone missing after attending a party at Rautel's house. They recognized the victim's unique features, including tattoos. When Ariadna's relatives arrived to formally identify the body, their fears were validated. Her brother Omar feared the worst and reported the missing person to the police, speculating that the woman discovered might be his sister. Meanwhile, the state authorities in Morelos began their investigation, but the police's initial response was heavily criticized because it was said that critical traces at the scene were not properly documented and that evidence collection protocols were broken. The family's immediate reaction was a call for justice. They started demanding a transparent investigation and accountability for those responsible. That same day, they reached out to friends active on social media to bring attention to the case. What began as a small campaign quickly gained traction, drawing in thousands of people. Omar recognized his sister by a tattoo on her shoulder that was a tribute to their late mother. The family's shock was further compounded by the condition of her body, with the bruises and injuries on her face and arms clearly indicating a violent incident. Despite growing public pressure, Morelos police insisted that the death might have been caused by an accident and that a forensic examination would be necessary before any further investigation could begin. This position only raised more concerns and strengthened suspicions that powerful people might be hiding the truth. Since they were the last to see Ariadna alive, Rautel and Vanessa were the first persons detectives got in touch with. Their statements served as the basis for the early theories of what might have transpired in his first account. According to Rautel, Ariadna decided to leave his house after the party and called a cab. He said she appeared a little disturbed, but didn't exhibit any signs of major concern. He escorted her to the door, and she departed for an unknown destination. Inconsistencies in their version swiftly raised suspicions. The first red flag was the lack of any evidence confirming a taxi ride. Neither Rautel nor Vanessa could provide the driver's contact information or any proof to support their statements. Vanessa backed up his story by adding that Ariadna had indeed left in a taxi and hadn't mentioned her destination. Investigators later found that despite the fact that multiple taxi calls had been made in the vicinity of Rautel's house that evening, none of the drivers reported picking up Ariadna. The second issue was Vanessa's behavior. At first, she insisted that Ariadna had left alone, but later she added that they had argued during the party, which may have upset Ariadna. Additionally, Ariadna's friends told police that Vanessa had messaged them, attempting to imply that Ariadna might have hurt herself, referencing the cryptic social media post that she had made just hours before she vanished. Although her family and close friends initially dismissed it as a joke, it did raise concerns. Investigators started to suspect that it might be a reflection of her actual emotional state that evening. Another concerning factor was Vanessa's increasingly erratic behavior, which was evident in her messages to Ariadna's friends. In one text, she acknowledged that she was afraid of being suspected, but did not explain why, further escalating her behavior. Investigators believe Vanessa may be hiding important information. Although the investigation's preliminary conclusions were unclear about the precise circumstances of Ariadna's death, later efforts by law enforcement and outside specialists discovered important evidence. These conclusions were based on texts found on the suspect's phones and 2 autopsy security film. The first forensic report was conducted. Ed, in the state of Morelos, asserted that bronchial aspiration-related asphyxiation was the cause of Ariadna's death. Ariadna's family immediately questioned the examiner's conclusion that food and alcohol in her flight may have contributed to her death, pointing out the many bruises and injuries on her body that the report did not sufficiently address despite the official conclusions. Under pressure from the family and the public, her family demanded a second exam. For additional examination, Ariadna's remains was sent to a separate forensic institute in Mexico City. The results of the second autopsy totally defied the first conclusions. Experts discovered numerous injuries, including bruises from head trauma and signs of physical force on her arms and legs, which suggested an attempt to defend herself. These findings confirmed that her death was not an accident or simply related to alcohol. Rather, it was the result of violent actions, leading authorities to reclassify the case as a criminal act. Surveillance footage taken from Rautel's residence parking garage was essential to the investigation because it showed him carrying Ariadna's lifeless body to his car the morning after the party. The footage also showed him loading her body into the car and driving away. These recordings became unquestionable proof, linking Rautel and Vanessa's phones to the movement of the body and its subsequent concealment. The texts showed attempts to rationalize their actions to Ariadna's pals and coordinate their accounts for law enforcement. Rautel reassured Vanessa that everything was under control as she voiced concern about the pressure from Ariadna's relatives. In her conversations with Ariadna's friends, Vanessa repeatedly implied that Ariadna might have been experiencing emotional distress, raising the possibility of self-harm. This narrative ran counter to Ariadna's friends' descriptions of her as a happy and energetic person who showed no signs of such tendencies. One message even included specific instructions on how to respond to questions in a way that wouldn't raise suspicion. The evidence from the second autopsy surveillance footage and retrieved communications provided a clearer picture of what had transpired, which further heightened suspicions regarding Vanessa's involvement. The violent nature of Ariadna's death and the subsequent concealment of her body were evident from the evidence, which led investigators to conclude that the initial claims of an accidental death or that Ariadna had left Rautel's home voluntarily did not match reality. These findings served as the basis for charges against Rautel and Vanessa, who would soon stand trial for their actions. Investigators found that Vanessa, the first person arrested, had been in continuous contact with Rautel in the days after the incident, discussing strategies to avoid accountability. During her initial interrogations, she was under close public observation when she was arrested. Vanessa stated that she was not involved in Ariadna's death. However, her claims were contradicted. A fact check of Vanessa's assertions showed contradictions. Despite her insistence that she had gone to bed early the night of the incident and was not aware of what happened thereafter. Investigators also found that Vanessa purposefully destroyed potential evidence by removing pictures of Mays and other incriminating information in an attempt to hide her role in covering up the crime after realizing the growing evidence against him. Text messages revealed that she was fully aware of what had happened and had discussed the details with Rautel. Rautel made the decision to turn himself in to the authorities with his attorneys by declaring his innocence and saying that he did not hurt Ariadna, but instead panicked and tried to conceal her body out of fear of the repercussions. According to his version of events, he discovered Ariadna unconscious in his house the morning after the party and decided to dispose of the body to allay suspicions. But his version of events raised serious questions because the second autopsy's findings confirmed a violent cause of death, which contradicted his claims. He carried the body while making obvious attempts to conceal his activities rather than calling for assistance, according to second surveillance footage. As the inquiry went on concerning information regarding possible corruption between Rautel and the prosecutor's office in Morelos emerged, and his text exchanges with Vanessa also showed a concerted attempt to agree on false narratives about what had transpired. Ariadna's family accused the prosecutor of exploiting their position to shield Rautel from responsibility after the state's first autopsy report purposefully left out references to injuries that were obviously indicative of violence. The public was incensed by these accusations. The Morelos prosecutor's decision was reviewed by Mexico City officials, and an internal affairs division began looking into potential misconduct. According to some witnesses, Rautel had ties to criminal organizations, which may have contributed to his seeming assurance in evading punishment. The case attracted a lot of attention, serving as a representation of structural problems in the legal system and emphasizing the importance of public pressure in seeking justice. At least one of the suspects knew more about what happened that night than they were willing to acknowledge, according to additional interrogations and evidence gathered. Nevertheless, neither Vanessa nor Rautel took direct responsibility, instead concentrating their statements on mutual attempts to defend their actions. Their actions only served to heighten suspicions and were a major contributing factor in their temporary detention. A thorough and drawn-out inquiry was conducted into the facts and motivations behind the tragedy that occurred that evening. Finding the truth necessitated meticulously reconstructing the events, analyzing the evidence, and closely observing how each person behaved during the party. Eventually, a more coherent picture emerged, assembled from contradictory testimonies, technical information, and the psychological profiles of the suspects. That fateful evening started at a restaurant in downtown Mexico City, where Ariadna, according to witness accounts and a text message analysis, Vanessa and Rautel, joined by mutual friends, enjoyed dinner and drinks. On the surface, everything seemed normal, with discussion, laughter, and music, but there were hints of underlying strain in the little details. After leaving the restaurant, the group went to Rautel's house, which was surrounded by high walls and had security cameras. This detail became crucial later in the investigation because it showed that Ariadna was unusually quiet and preoccupied. She checked her phone frequently, sending messages and answering calls, which was not typical of her at social gatherings. Her messages revealed that she had been texting a close friend to express unease about the party and concerns about some of the attendees. Although they were the hosts, Vanessa and Rautel's dynamic appeared tight. As the night went on, alcohol started to affect the group's behavior. Witnesses reported that Vanessa made several sharp remarks toward Ariadna, which the latter handled calmly in an attempt to avoid confrontation. Vanessa, who was already emotionally charged, reportedly raised her voice several times, accusing Ariadna of being disrespectful and unfriendly. These accusations didn't resonate with other members of the group, but they added to the rising tension. Rautel, meanwhile, appeared to remain neutral, but was clearly uncomfortable with Vanessa's behavior. A pivotal moment occurred early the following morning when witnesses saw Ariadna trying to leave the party. She was briefly seen outside the house, but soon after, and investigators concluded that during this time, Vanessa continued to confront Ariadna, leading to an open confrontation, though the specifics of the altercation are still unknown. Investigators believe Vanessa accused Ariadna of attracting too much attention from Rautel. Messages recovered from the phones confirmed that Vanessa and Rautel had discussed tense moments from that night. After the majority of the guests had left the party, only a few people remained in the house, including Vanessa, Rautel, and Ariadna. Investigators believe that Vanessa, who was reportedly heavily intoxicated, started acting aggressively, and that this is when an incident is thought to have occurred that resulted in Ariadna's fatal injuries. What caused Ariadna to share such an odd message on social media? That evening was initially written off as a joke. As the investigation progressed, friends confirmed that Ariadna might have been uncomfortable with Vanessa's behavior and the general atmosphere at the gathering. The post may have been an attempt to draw attention to herself or even serve as a subliminal warning. According to the reconstruction of events, A major contributing factor to the catastrophe was Vanessa's envy, which was made worse by drink and mental instability. Rautel's actions, which were probably an attempt to hide what had transpired, only made matters worse. These elements combined to produce the disastrous result that could have been prevented had the atmosphere at the party not been so tense and unstable. The decision brought the family closer together because other family members and friends helped the boy deal with his loss and provide him with a loving environment. Ariadna's 6-year-old son was left in the care of her older brother Omar, who stepped in to provide both financial and emotional support. Omar took on the responsibility of raising his nephew, working to preserve memories of Ariadna and surround him with the love she had always given during her life. The Ariadna family persisted in their efforts to learn the whole truth about her passing. They planned demonstrations, started social media campaigns, and attracted public notice. One notable accomplishment was attracting the attention of foreign media, which increased pressure on the Mexican legal system. Despite opposition from some authorities, the family and their legal team made sure that the case was handled transparently, taking into account all pertinent evidence. The public and media closely followed every stage of the investigation and trial, leaving little opportunity for any facts to be concealed or misrepresented. As a result, the preliminary court hearings surrounding Ariadna's death became a crucial moment in the pursuit of justice. Prosecutors used surveillance footage, phone call logs, and text message data as important pieces of evidence during the trial, which started with an emphasis on Rautel and Vanessa's responsibilities. The defense tried to refute the evidence, claiming that the tragedy was an unfortunate accident, but multiple testimonies and forensic analyses raised serious questions about that version of events. These materials showed not only the suspects' involvement in hiding the body, but also their possible role in the violent actions that resulted in Ariadna's death. Determining the motivations behind the crime was one of the trial's main goals. Vanessa was characterized by witnesses as impulsive and prone to aggressive conduct, which was frequently made worse by alcohol. While the defendants denied responsibility for Ariadna's death, their statements contradicted the evidence, adding to suspicions. Based on the evidence gathered, prosecutors have filed charges for Ariadna's death, potentially classifying it as femicide, a crime involving gender-based violence that is considered an aggravating factor under Mexican law. If found guilty, both defendants could face up to 70 years in prison. Rautel, on the other hand, was portrayed as having a dubious past and alleged ties to criminal networks, raising additional concerns about his involvement in the events of that night. And that brings us to the end of this case. Do you think justice was truly served, or is there more to uncover? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.